When I do our bios each week, I mention that I was a product wholesaler. And for those who aren't familiar with the financial services industry, the closest analog to that in an industry that most people know is a pharmaceutical rep. It's essentially the same job. Instead of calling on doctors and medical offices, you call on financial advisors, insurance agents, financial professionals. But it's essentially the same job. You're driving around and, funnily, when I would go to the doctor, I would be, dressed for work, and many times I'd walk in and I would see the nurse bristle because she thought I was a pharmaceutical rep and she was going to have to fend me off. I'd be like, no, I'm a patient. But I mention that because in my opening story today is about when I first started in that type of position. I had a new financial advisor move into my territory from another part of the country. He was in North Carolina and he moved up to Minnesota. And so my counterpart in North Carolina called me and said, hey, one of my advisors is moving up to the Twin Cities. You should get in touch with him. And so I reached out to him, and actually we ended up becoming quite good friends. Obviously, I was one of the first people that called him when he got to the Twin Cities, and I invited him over, and we got to know each other. And in that process, of course, because he was one of my advisors, I started logging my activity with him. So if I went to his office or if we did something that, even though we were friends, it still counted as business activity, so I would put it in my activity reports. But because he was new to the area, he wasn't producing a lot of new business for me. And so my boss started noticing, hey, you've got this guy, you see him all the time and he's not doing any business. What's the deal? And it wasn't really a negative question. It just was, hey, you're spending time with this guy. Is it an effectiveness problem? Is he not a good prospect? It's what a good boss should ask you. Anyway, I kind of mentioned this at one point to the financial advisor, and he took that personally as like, this guy isn't worthwhile. Why are you spending time on him? And it became his mission to get to be one of my A producers, one of my A clients. That is a good introduction for our topic today, because we are talking about 80-20 client segmentation. How do you break out your client list into your A clients, your B clients, C and D clients? And man, he went after it. Actually was a little bit interesting at times. Later, I would use that as bait if I knew someone was, very, probably social style there would be expressive or, driver or expressive. Philip, would you say?
I would say he's assertive and he's competitive. So I'm thinking he's expressive.
Right. And so he moved away in 2012. He went back down to North Carolina. His wife actually got into law school back in North Carolina, and they moved back down there. And he still mentions to this day that he wanted to get to be my A producer and that he did it kind of as in your face. So that will take us into episode 22 of the Valuability Podcast, 80-20 Client Segmentation. The Valuability Podcast is for financial advisors, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business, leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. My name is Danforth Fleek. As I mentioned, I was a product wholesaler and financial advisor for over 20 years, and I am joined each week by my co-host, friend, and longtime mentor Philip Simonson. Philip has been in financial services for over 40 years as a financial advisor, field leader, sales trainer, and senior manager, covering areas such as advisor development and field operations. Philip, I wanted to mention to you, we had our first guest on in the last couple episodes, David Adler of Recontext Data Solutions, and actually we got a business connection for him. I don't know if it's become actual work that he's able to charge for, but one of our listeners reached out and mentioned that she was working on a project that he is very likely at least a good information source for, if not to be the actual consultant on that project. So, and it's a huge global corporation, so we are making connections.
That's the power of the network.
Absolutely. You can find the Valuability Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you find your podcasts, we should be there. We also have a YouTube channel. Search Value-Ability on YouTube to find us there. You can also find us on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the Episodes tab, and our episode player is there. That has our latest 25 episodes, and we are getting close to our 25th episode, so pretty soon we will have some rolling off and we'll create an archive for that. But wherever you find us, like, review, subscribe, and share the mantra of podcasters throughout the known universe. If you would like to connect with us, we have a new email address. info@value-ability.com is the best way to get in touch with us. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. If you want to connect with us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, go to value-ability.com and click on the Contact Us tab. All of our social media links are there. That brings us to our main topic, 80/20 client segmentation. Philip, this is famously known by the economist who first discovered this concept, and he is
Pareto.
Yes. Do you know his first name? I've never known his first name.
It's Italian, I can tell you that.
It is indeed.
The name ends in the fall, and I do remember, and
Vilifredo Pareto.
Well, that's why I don't remember it. If I can't pronounce it, I'm not going to clutter my mind.
Right. Vilifredo Pareto was an Italian economist. He actually worked and taught at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. He first noted this effect in 1896, and essentially the principle is that 80% of effects come from 20% of causes. Now, the original observation was in relating to wealth. He was an economist, and his observation was that 80% of Italy's land was owned by 20% of the population. But this, over the years, has been applied to many other fields, and there are areas much more diverse than just economics where this applies. For example, in computing, they have found that fixing 20% of bugs fixes about 80% of crashes in computers. Interestingly, also in baseball, of course, very heavy statistical analysis in baseball world, 15% of players generate 85% of the statistic wins above replacement, which I don't follow baseball super close, but I know that's a super, super important statistic for stat geeks. It's essentially, how many more wins do you generate than the next person that they could get? And so that's huge. It's even more concentrated. We'll talk about concentration levels of effects versus causes in a minute. And then in taxation, going back to economics, in 2000, 2006, 2018, it was noted that 20% of the U.S. population pays 80% of federal income taxes. always want to note there that that's just income tax, right? That doesn't include gas taxes and sales tax and things like
mortgage,
that, right?
real estate tax,
property taxes,
cetera,
all of that, right? So, but on that level, income tax level, 20% of the population is paying 80% of the federal income tax. So this principle pops up, and many people call it Pareto's rule, or just simply the 80-20 rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to just say the 80-20 or Pareto's principle,
right?
Because it's principles are those eternal truths, right? Where you got to sow before you reap, for example.
Right.
Stand the test of time.
Right. Yeah, and by the time I got into the industry in the mid-90s, this was pretty common parlance, right? This was very well known in the sales world that from a client standpoint, you have a fairly dedicated group of clients that generate a fairly significant portion of your overall revenue, right? So now we're going to talk about this, just a quick note, we're going to talk about this in relation to a financial advisor. As I mentioned, both Philip and I have worked in financial services for most of our careers. Well, actually all of our careers for both of us. some you in painting and restaurant work when you were younger, and me in restaurants when I was younger. But after that, we've pretty much been in financial services since we got out of school.
And Dan, before I know you're going to kick off here, in those nearly 40 some years, I'll just share some of our listeners who are working for a broker dealer. You probably have this report. Sometimes you'll hear, one broker dealer I worked with, it was called the Decile Report. Another one is called, and you remember this one too, Dan, it was the ROD report, or Revenue Opportunity Diagnostic report. And it just gives you a high-level look at your client base, broken down into age groups. That's one characteristic of a segment. And then into 10 equal, if it's a decile report, 10 equal groups or deciles. That lists out all the your clients and the key information about their assets and their products, etc., and broken down by, as you said, Dan, the results. In this case, GDC or commission.
Right, and it's sometimes called a quintile report if it's broken down into 20% groups. Right, there are 5 sets of 20. So yeah, we'll have any of a number of names in the financial services realm. But also wanted to make the point that this is applicable across all business models.
Absolutely, as you pointed out already.
Right. What you're doing, I actually took a look at one of my clients. I work on some Excel spreadsheets for one of my clients. I took a look at their business model, and they have, let's say, several thousand clients. So much bigger than average financial advisor. And it was a little bit more stratified. I want to say the top 30% generated 80% of their revenue, but it was still quite focused. And the point there is, as we'll talk about in a minute, is that probably comes down to the fact that they're not focusing properly, right? They don't have a specific client system for their salespeople. So they simply are going out and calling on people, and it's kind of naturally falling that way. If they focused more on those producers, they could likely become more efficient. So just want to throw that out there. We are going to talk about this in terms of revenue and number of clients in numbers that are similar to what you would find in a financial advice practice. But no, you can replace these numbers with whatever client numbers you have in your business, and it should still be applicable. And just a quick shameless plug, if you want help with that, reach out to us. Send us an email at info@value-ability.com. I'd be happy to work with you on sorting through your client list and setting up this report and figuring that out. So let's then jump in and talk about the process. And there's going to be a bunch of numbers here, so I'm going to say as Philip does, say, grab a piece of paper if you're not driving, if you're not out and about, walking the dog or something like that. Grab a piece of paper to jot some numbers down. It will make things easier. They aren't super complicated numbers, and I tried to keep them pretty easy to visualize. So if you are out and about, you should still be able to follow. But we're going to take an example of a business that has $1 million in revenue and 200 clients. Okay. So essentially what you need to do is, as Philip mentioned, whether you have a report that you can pull from your clearing company or broker dealer if you're in the financial services business, or if you have an accounting software, if you're running another type of business, that you can export that into Excel or a spreadsheet program. Do that, and then you want to rank in order of revenue per client. So client A, the amount of revenue they generate in a year. Client B, the amount of revenue that they generate in a year. And you want to sort by that revenue number. So the biggest revenue generator at top, and then the smallest at the bottom. So then you add up all of your client revenue until you reach 80% of your revenue. So as an example, we've got $1 million in revenue, 200 clients. $800,000 is the number that you want to focus in on. So you start adding up that column, and when you get to 800,000, you're going to draw a line there. Now we're going to call that your cutoff, okay? And we're going to talk about being above the Pareto cutoff and below the Pareto cutoff. So that's the cutoff that we want to generate. So in a balanced business, one that very closely follows Pareto's principle, you would have 40 clients above the Pareto cutoff and 160 clients below the Pareto cutoff. So you got 200 total clients, 40 into 200 is 20%, right?
Yep.
Very straightforward. 160 into 200 is 80%. So you would have 40 clients above the Pareto principle, 160 below. Now here's the really interesting numbers. You then take your 800,000 and you divide that by 40, right? This is going to give you the average revenue per client above the Pareto cutoff. In this example, you take 800,000 divided by 40, that's 20,000 per client you're getting in revenue from your above the cutoff clients. Below 200,000 divided by 160 is $1,250.
And then if you even want to take it further, Dan, what I've found, if you wanted to do it by the decile and 10 groups, it's interesting. The bottom 50%, what oftentimes you find is that you're maybe making, and this is financial services industry, maybe $25, $30 per year off of these clients. So this is, helps you make those decisions about weeding and saving. And, it just gives you questions to start asking, but it takes the emotion away where, people, you worked hard for gathering those clients, but at some point you've got to look at it as making some business decisions. Is that client adding to your bottom line, or is it costing you?
Yeah, it's a great point to make right at that point, because in that bottom group, in your, below the Pareto cutoff group, there are clients in there that are worthwhile. Mm-hmm. And the question becomes then, how do we deal with them? Once I get through these next two examples, we'll jump to that and talk about, once you break this out, how do you interact with these different groups and what do you do with them? Because there are people in that, they may not be generating a ton of revenue, but there are some options there. So we'll circle back to that in a second. Mm-hmm. So there are two other potentials for styles of business, and they are top heavy and bottom heavy, right? So top heavy would be if you are, counting down from the top of your list, and you draw that cutoff, and that cutoff comes after 30 clients. Okay, so you take 30 clients divided into the 200, that's 15%. So now 15% of your book is generating 80% of your revenue. The bottom 170 remaining clients then are generating 85% of your revenue, right? So in this situation, you have above the Pareto line, 800,000 divided by 30 equals 26,666. So you're more concentrated in this top heavy. That's why it's called top heavy. Even though there's fewer clients generating the 80%, the reason why we call it top heavy is that those clients are generating more. Typically what happens, especially in financial services, is you have one or two clients that are considerably outside of your typical client group. So if you typically have clients that have, $500,000 to $1 million of investable assets, you may have one that has $10 million. Or if your, asset size is larger, you may have one that's even bigger than 10 million. So usually when you have this concentrated type of book, it's because you have a couple of clients that are significantly larger. Now, this just points out a little bit of risk in that a lot of your revenue is being generated by a couple of clients. And so what it then focuses in on, as we'll talk again in a minute, is when we're looking at your A, B, C, and D clients, how do you work that book, right? So that'll give you some more information. So again, we'll circle back to that in a second. So bottom heavy is, let's say you're counting down from the top and you get to draw your Pareto cutoff at 60 clients, right? So now you have 60 clients into 200. That's 30% of your clients generating 80% of your revenue. 140 clients then are below the Pareto cutoff. 140 into 200 is 70%. So here are the numbers there. You're above the Pareto cutoff clients, 800 divided by 60. They're generating $13,333 in revenue. And your bottom clients still are only generating $1,428. So it's still a big gap, right? You're above the cutoff. People are still generating way more in revenue, 10 times the revenue, but it is more stratified, and you have a larger group generating that 80% of your revenue. So any points you want to make on that before we move on then to breaking it out?
I'll can be consistent and predictable. I'm just going to do a shameless plug here. Dan knows this. He's mastered this. And if any of you are interested, one of the things you can work with Dan and hire him out. We take this even to the next level, how to export this data. Other things besides just the production and that's the commission, but it's also wise to, garbage in, garbage out, but take a look at when creating this type of report, what are their ages? What are the different products that they have? What is the, as Dan said, total production that they've earned you or commission over the last year, but take a look at the last 5 years. And there's different ways in which you can then use this report. One, if you're buying a practice, so we can help you then determine what this practice is worth. But also, as we're going to get into now, is questions to ask to see, how can you move some of those C clients up to A clients or B clients? Because if they might be C clients, but their ages, they're getting ready to retire, and if they have 401ks, and even though they haven't invested with you lately, you don't want to just throw those away. And as one example, and that's, I'd say, give these reports and this ability to produce this report, and Dan again can work with you. It just gives you what will help you do is to ask the right questions, and then from those questions you'll determine your strategy and tactics of how to work this book better.
Yeah, I would just follow on there and say we're working on this is all quantitative, right? You're looking at just numbers. And it's a great place to start, but there are also qualitative things, and that's actually a great lead-in to the next section. So once you've got your Pareto cutoff, you've got your above people and your below people, you essentially then just take each group and you divide it in half, right? You take the amount of revenue being generated by your above clients, you divide that in half, and you do the same thing you just did. You count down through your top group until you get halfway through. And so you're going to have a set of A clients and a set of B clients then. So the top 50% of revenue are your A clients. The bottom 50% of revenue are B clients. And you do the same thing in the bottom, below the Pareto cutoff. Take the total amount, divide it by 50%, and then count down from the top of the below group till you get to 50%, and then you draw that line. And then those are your C and your D clients. Now, the A's and B's are where you want to focus your time. Now, in the financial services world, we have regulations. You have to, obviously, if you're doing advisory business with clients, you have to offer them at least one meeting per year, and you should talk to them. Now, they can decline it, of course, but you need to offer that, and it's a very, very important that you have those meetings if you are doing fiduciary investment advice through a registered investment advisory process. Super, super important to do that. But then this is how you build out your service model, is your A and B clients are the ones that you want to focus on. And another little bit of shameless plug, our client review process has these models. So do you meet with them annually, semi-annually, or quarterly, and how to grade them and put them into your contact management system, and then how to actually run that system. We've got that all built out for you. So that's info for a different podcast. But now the question is, how many clients can you have? In all of our examples, we have, above the Pareto line, 40, 30, 60 clients that are generating a heavy amount of that revenue. And the question is, obviously, you're going to focus in on those bottom clients, but you need to decide what to do with them. You need to take a good hard look at that group and decide who in the C and D clients have the ability to become A and B clients. As Philip mentioned previously, maybe they have a retirement plan rollover. You've been working with them throughout the years, or they're going to get an inheritance, or sell a business or something like that, where they're going to be generating more revenue going forward. But you need to take a good hard look at that and say, is this a client that I believe can become an A or B client? Can they generate $20,000 a year in revenue? Can they generate $25,000 a year in revenue? Can they generate $13,000 a year in revenue, depending on what your specific book looks like? Can they move into that A or B? You note those people as top prospects. I call them top prospects because they're warm prospects. Those are people that are already in your book. The question is, how do you then generate that revenue? And if you're running a traditional commission-based business, the answer to that question, of course, Philip, is go deeper.
You
right?
Go deeper and start looking at the recurring revenue, and because that's one of our mantras is to run a successful business, you've got to manage these three things: net income, and net income can be generated best by recurring revenue, because the difference between a customer and a client is the client thinks so highly of you, they're willing to add you in as a line item in their budget. And then it's, as you know, processes. And as you said, Dan, here, this is where you're starting to look at these processes. Pareto's principle is just a process that you're describing to people, and then leading people. And Dan, I'll build on it. I remember reading a study, and there's this organization. It was, two market researchers were independently dispatched to a developing world country by a large shoe manufacturer. And when the first reports came back to the corporate headquarters, one message read, "No market here. No one or nobody wears shoes." The other report promised, "Great market here. Nobody has any." So now my segue back to you on this one is you start looking at these reports, and once you've got the reports, go in it with open eyes, and you wanna make sure when you think about what I like to do is other factors, as Dan was mentioning, their age, their net worth, their income, children, grandchildren, recent upcoming life changes, current product mix, their risk tolerance. And you sort through all this to figure out what your ideal client criteria is, and also where those opportunities are to upgrade your client base. And then you can assess your readiness level if you've got big product mixes in long-term care, and you've got a large group who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, but a gap, no long-term care. This might be an opportunity for you in an upcoming review. So use a tool to help you prepare for reviews as well.
Absolutely. So that's an excellent point, and it leads into my next comment, which is once you have gone through your C&D list and added in those top prospects, people that you think can get into your A and B client section, you may, just as an example, let's say that you have a balanced book and you're at 40 clients above your Pareto cutoff, 160 below, and let's say that you have 40 more clients that you find in your below group that you think can become C and D, or I'm sorry, can move from C and D to become A and Bs.
Right.
What do you do with the rest of those people? Well, the reality of the rest of those people is that they probably actually can become A and B clients. The problem is probably the relationship, right? There's probably a connection there that isn't firing right. It may be a bias that you have on your part. And, it's one of the statistics that I always loved talking to financial advisors about is the average number of financial professionals that a person works with while they're saving for retirement is 5. And that always shocks financial advisors because every single financial advisor thinks, oh no, I have all my clients' money. It's just the way you think about it, right? Like, even if you've gone through the financial planning process, even if you've done discovery, a lot of times you will find that, they might have a investment person at the bank that has a, $50,000 mutual fund. They might have that fraternal order advisor that goes to their church that has, a whole life insurance policy or a small IRA. They may have a CPA that also does investments that has opened up a Roth IRA for them at some point. Advisors don't always realize that there are connections that they're missing, or the bias might be on the other side, right? It might be that the client feels like they're not connecting with that financial advisor. And so the answer to that is, if you're in this size of a book, if you're generating, $1 million a year in revenue, you have 200 clients, and 40 of your clients are generating 800,000, that is screaming out to bring on a new financial advisor to work that book of business. Now, my main client, when I was wholesaling, had a program built in to do this process. And I tell you, every single time one of my advisors went through that process, that new financial advisor would come in, and I invariably would come in and talk to my client, the experienced financial advisor, and hear something muttered underneath their breath. I worked that person for 15 years, and that young whippersnapper got a $200,000 rollover out of him the first time they met with him. And just kind of grumbling about it. I'm like, right, but there was a reason why that connection didn't get made. Or there wasn't, but 90 to 95% of the time, there was a reason why that connection wasn't made. And it not everybody's built to work with everybody, right? There are clients I've run into in my life as one of the things that I loved about wholesaling. I told people this all the time. I got to pick who I worked with. If I went in to an office and the advisor wasn't nice to me or I didn't like them, I didn't have to go back. And I really enjoyed having that control. I had plenty of people to call on, and the same is true for financial advisors. If that connection's not there, you need to do, it's the thing that you mentioned from a management standpoint, Philip, is if it's a work situation and you're married, you got to find them a job that's better suited for them, right? Is the way that you put it. Right? Yes. This job is not meant for you. Let's find what job you are meant to do so that you can be happier. And it's the same thing with clients. Let's find you an advisor that's going to be the right fit for you, because obviously I'm not.
Dan, I'd like to just add a different perspective on all of that. I agree. You can hire in a junior advisor, but with a caveat. Now, my caveats are this: that particularly if you're my age and your book is also aging, they're going to want to see a younger advisor in here so that they can continue to hang their hat on your cloak hat when they come into your office and feel comfortable that there's going to be someone there long term. So you need to be thinking about that from a succession standpoint.
That's great.
However, my other caveat here is what I've learned. If the many advisors are not good at being leaders, they're good at being small business owners, tackling problems, coming up with solutions, block and tackle, but they don't like managing and leading others. So if you do happen to fall into that category, it is okay. But then the other benefit of breaking this report down like we have, you can figure out what that bottom percentage that Dan had referenced, it's what it's worth. And you can sell that book. And that's okay too. And I loved where you were going, Dan, and I might be stealing some of your thunder, but you're going to also figure out your ideal client criteria. And by going through this, and my ideal client criteria is, if I'm going to work with people, I've got to like them. If I don't like them, I'm at a stage now I'm not working with them. 2, they've got to be willing to act on my advice. And and if I'm looking at this book and I've offered financial planning to these people, they've said no, they just wanted product relationship. Well, it might not be a good relationship going forward. And they got to be willing to act on my advice, because at some point I'm going to, if I'm, first job of a good leader is to find current reality in non-obscure ways, point out, hey, here's where you want to be, but the reality is you're down here. The difference in between is pain and growth. And a good leader, if you're hiring me out as a consultant, you got to be able to be a good truth teller. And lastly, got to be willing to pay for your services. If they don't meet that 3 criteria, then move on. Don't take it emotionally.
Those are great points. That takes us to really the last 2 things that I want to point out before we wrap up this section, and that is whether you do a junior arrangement and bring in a new financial advisor, or you sell that portion of your book, or you simply go through and cull your clients. Many times I hear from financial advisors that one of the most liberating experiences is, quote unquote, firing clients. And this isn't exactly firing, right? Firing is when you have a problem client, or you have a client that's causing disruption to your business and you just need to sever that. This is just really, if you're not going to bring on a junior, if you're not going to sell that portion, realize how little return you're getting for the income that those people are generating and let them go. Call them in and just say, hey, look, you're not, as you mentioned, I've gathered my ideal client and I need to focus down, and you actually have a script for that, right?
I do. And I think it's a perfect timing with this crisis, and it just goes, Dan, 30 seconds. Look, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, I want to set up a time for a review during this crisis. I've also been analyzing the book of business and our client service model, and I realize I can't be all things to all people. So what I want to do is set up a time for you to come in. And what we found in our practice, there's going to be 3 new levels of services that we're going to provide, and I want to explain those services to you so you can choose the one that's most appropriate for you. And I have these times available, and then list them out to give them a selection of 2 times. What you're doing there is, it could be, if they're product only, look, no in-depth analysis, no in-depth recommendations. I can go up, I'm independent, get the best product, and you can purchase it from me. And it's usually from a commission standpoint, or it's going to be a financial planning or an advisory level of, is your maybe your platinum level in financial planning / commissions for, people with 100,000 or less.
Right.
You'll have to determine your ideal client criteria there, but that's the way I did it, Dan. Maybe a little more than 30 seconds, but now back to you.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the other option there is, right, like no relationship is to say, hey, look, this just doesn't fit. And I think that you should find someone that's a better fit for what you want. And so as you're culling then that list, you then now know that there's a gap. So if we have, your 40 original clients and then the 40 that we mentioned, this is an example stretching out over quite a bit of time, so you can follow along with it. We have the original 40, then we went through and we looked at our C&Ds. We picked 40 quote-unquote top prospects. We have 80 people. Generally any salesperson, financial advisor, any business can have 200 really good clients. So 160 to 200 is the target number that one person can really effectively manage. So now, let's take 160 as your target. You've got 80. Now we have 80 other slots that we need to fill. That's the amount of time you then spend on prospecting. And whether that's seminars or asking for client referrals or however you prospect, calling new prospects, going out and meeting people at business functions, whatever it is, as you're building a model week, to tie back into one of our previous episodes, that gives you now how much time you need to be spending on generating those prospecting leads and following up on them. Now, the other thing that I just want to tack on here, this also ties into actually our last 2 episodes of Connecting with Community. The other option, and this just occurred to me while I was jotting these notes down, is, as I was doing research for having the discussions that we had with David Adler over the last 2 weeks, the number one way in which financial advisors can really connect with their community and help financial education is through pro bono work. And this is an opportunity then to say, hey, I have a slot for 10 people where I'm going to do true, free pro bono financial advice for people in my community that either don't have the assets or don't have the means to afford my services on a regular basis. So I just kind of wanted to tack that in there as well. If you're an advisor, and there are tons out there as I'm going around on Twitter that are focused on being socially conscious, focused on their morals, their faith, connecting with their community, and I would posit that 80 to 90% of financial advisors are people who care about their community. There are a few, I won't social style shame
right.
who they are, but there's some people out there that are narcissistic, egotistic. They're not interested in helping out their community. But as I have found, this is also an 80-20. It's 80 to 90% of financial advisors are in it for the right reason. Actually, on Twitter, somebody that I follow posted a picture of a client thank you card that said, "Thank you for telling us that we could retire. We only had 15 to 20 good years left. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be living this good life." And I just responded to him, "That's the reason you do this job. The money's nice. Everything else is great. Being able to take care of your families, all of that's awesome. The reason you do the financial advice job is stuff like that." I have a stack of, probably 5 or 6 of notes like that from clients over the years that I keep to boost me. But that's really why you do the job, is to have that kind of impact. So just wanted to put that little nugget in there as we wrap up and say, hey, give this an opportunity, or take this as an opportunity when you're doing this, client selection, to reach out and do some pro bono work and help out people in the community and create financial education, or start working with a school, do some financial education seminars for free. Just thought it was a great opportunity to connect that back to that concept that we were talking about over the last few weeks. So
yeah, Dan, I'm going to just finish by I'm going to go back to our first podcast, and it was The Chosen or Frozen, and that's that was just back in March, and the message there was close to 20% of the advisors actually contacted their clients within the 48 hours of the crisis. Well, as you think about this, a lot of advisors, in looking at their client base, and this is a great time to run this report, because you do have what I'll call, you could have some sleeping dogs, that lower 50%. And well, sure, if you have these sleeping dogs or clients you never hear from, but you aren't really right, they're not really right for your business long term. Maybe some people say, well, I should just let them snooze while I focus on new business. But here's the risk: they come out of hibernation hungry because you've been ignoring them and calling yourself their advisor. The risk is that they wake up and start sucking your time. So the risk is that even if you don't they don't take your physical time, there's a certain amount of guilt and mental energy that goes into maintaining these people. And there's all this to consider, and it just depends on where you are and what your true financial reality is. But I bet at least there's one client you could probably let go and actually profit by the experience, and here's how. And this isn't about this whole session firing your clients, but it's also doing a real good assessment of your practice and where those opportunities are. But psychologically, you can recover if you cannot recover the real cost to you and your business, never mind the psychological cost. No doubt you're already painfully aware of how keeping some of these clients just sucks the enjoyment right out of your work. But how about the time these people waste? Make sure you ask these questions. You can capitalize in the current environment instead of just suffering from it. And that in today's economic climate provides you with an opportunity to create a new kind of business you really want to generate more revenue. Again, going back to that first episode, over 90% of the 97, only 1%, it was 3%, said that they would actually invest with the advisor that did not call them after the 9/11 crisis, and over 90% of them said they would be investing in the next 12 months. And then you can redefine your relationship and re-examine your strategy. Maybe it's a long time since you set the ground rules with some of these clients. So there's, again, a reason why to bring them in, describe your new levels of services, and also maybe you never did, but now's your chance. So I just want to, summarize how to think about upgrading your client base and what to do with these numbers.
You absolutely hit it. I think you actually, when you've done these analyses, you would go down to dollars per hour, right?
Absolutely,
that each type of client generates in terms of the amount. And that's what clicked into my mind is yes, exactly what you said. So many people look at those clients and say, oh, well, yeah, they're only generating $250 a year, but I never talk to them. That's not true. They are taking, at least renting space in your head at some point, right?
Yes.
Whether it's getting statements or having to file things or do compliance reports on them. Like there's stuff going on that you're not mentally accounting for. And so if you think about it, even at $25, even if you only spend half an hour, right? That's $50 an hour you're getting paid for that time.
Right.
Compare that to the people that are your A and B clients and how much time you spend with them, and it's $500, $1,000, $1,500 an hour. And that's where you really start to see this stark difference is so many, and it's all based on how we build our books, right? It's the zero-sum game. When you're a newer advisor, any dollar counts, and
you'll sell a dead dog an insurance policy if you think you can.
Right.
But you weed and save. It's
right.
It's a maturation process.
It is.
And
it
is
is
no different from what accountants and lawyers do here. You're just doing big practice management.
And it's one of the first things I learned, right? When you do this, you actually see your income go up over time, right? When you remove the clients that are less efficient for you, you see your income go up over time. And that's the big fear of doing these. So that takes us to the end of our main section, because we will keep going back and forth as we are wont to do.
We're good at that.
Yes, absolutely. Our article review for this week is titled, What CARES Act Withdrawals Could Mean for Client Retirement Savings. And since I've done the majority of the yakking, I will let you start out.
I did the summary. You go, partner.
Sure. Okay. Bottom line, I picked this because this is the first reaction I had at the beginning of the pandemic when this topic started coming up was, this is not your emergency fund. Right? This is not your emergency fund. And it paints a stark picture for the impact of taking withdrawals from your retirement plans and then not repaying them. So the CARES Act has allowed that you can take out a withdrawal without paying the 10% penalty, and you have then 3 years to repay that. Now, the first thing that I say there is, as I find with retirement plan loans, I would find the 80-20 has got to fall. 80% don't repay and 20% do. Like, it just is a stretch to think. If we're going to apply the Pareto Principle to this, I'm going to guess that it falls 20% of people repay their loans and 80% don't. So many times I've done a retirement plan rollover, and there's an outstanding loan that you have to take care of or take it as a distribution when you do that rollover. And that was my first response was, it's just a giant concern that, and then it's being reinforced by the powers that be. And I won't get political about this. Both parties approved this. Your retirement savings is for retirement. There's a famous online cartoon. So it was right when animated online cartoon websites came up where you could go in and pick this character, pick that character, and then type in the text, and it would create a little animated cartoon. Right? And it was, one of them was a day in the life of a financial advisor, and the whole context of the cartoon was the fact that the client wanted to use their $100,000 IRA for everything, right? I'm going to use that IRA to buy a condo in Florida. Oh, I'm going to use that IRA to send my kids to school. Oh, I'm going to use that IRA as my retirement savings. And they just looked at the retirement IRA as their entire piggy bank that they were just going to dole money out of for all these different needs. And look, this, again, unprecedented, certainly nobody expected what has happened economically and throughout the world medically, but I thought it was a great thing to bring up from the standpoint that if you are having to dip into your retirement savings, really, really, really have a plan for getting that money back in. It's super important. The limits of how much money you can put in, this kind of dovetails so many of the topics that we talk about. Having a plan, the time value of money, taxes, getting that money to be tax deferred, strategic. If you're out there and you are going to be doing this and you're not working with a financial advisor, this is a great time to work with someone, because you need to look strategically at how you're going to take this money, where it's going to come from, what impact that's going to have. Having a financial advisor, this is where the rubber meets the road. And I call it, putting Humpty Dumpty back together, where, that robo-advisor website isn't going to give you an answer for where this money should come from. This is where a human gives that type of advice. And just some of the numbers are staggering. So in the article, they share a graph that says impact on retirement savings when CARES Act withdrawal not repaid. So just to give you some examples, if you're 25 to 29, it would have a medium reduction in retirement balance at age 65. What is the impact at age 65? So for people 25 to 29, it would be a negative 10% impact on taking the withdrawal and not repaying it. So you're losing 1/10 of your retirement savings over that time frame. And then by the time you get to your 40s, so 45 to 49, it's 20%. And then you fast forward to being in your 60s, it could be as high as 45% negative impact if you're in your early 60s and you're taking those withdrawals and not paying them back. So like I said, it just kind of wraps up a whole bunch of different things that we've been talking about, and that's why I thought it was a great article to chat about.
Yeah, well summarized, and I have nothing to add to it, believe it or not. Well done. Over back to you. Let's close this thing out.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna give the listeners a little peek at the Philip and Danforth Fleek relationship. We were joking with each other a couple weeks ago. Philip said,
"Oh,
how many of these have you led? How many have I led?" And I was like, "Yeah, you've led a couple more than I have." Yeah, okay, I'll do them. So I've been kind of the lead on the last couple, and then I'm going to be the lead on the next couple weeks. And then we were kind of doing our planning. I'm like, all right, well, what about episode 24 and 25? Well, I can lead this. And all of a sudden there's this, I need to lead one. I haven't led one in a while. The expressive started to raise. So the tone changed a little bit.
As our listeners noticed, I'm still not absence of words during this, even though I'm not leading. So you do a great job.
Well, but
to mess with you is to love you,
absolutely.
And brother, I love you.
Absolutely.
Take her on home.
Well, and we have a great relationship. It's the thing I enjoy so much about doing all of this. So we could just be totally open about these things, call each other out, mess with each other, have a good time. So we hope that you have enjoyed the time you spent with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have topics that you would like us to cover on the podcast or any questions, again, we have that new email address, info@value-ability.com. Again, info@value-ability.com to shoot us an email with any topics or questions that you might have. Or, as we've mentioned, if there are projects that you would like us to work on, we'd be happy to give you a quote for that. Social media, if you want to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, go to value-ability.com and click on the Contact Us tab, and all of our social media links are right there at the top of the page. Again, that's value-ability.com. Click on the Contact Us tab for all of our social media links. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. And still, best thing you can do for us is tell other folks that you think might be interested in the podcast about us. Next episode 23, we're going to be covering asking good questions and active listening. So very excited to do that. Business owners, salespeople, financial advisors out there, how do you segment your clients? If you don't do this type of 80-20 client segmentation, Pareto Principle client segmentation, how do you do it? Is it purely qualitative? Reach out to us, let us know, send us an email, or reach out to us on one of our social media links. I'd really like to know in businesses, be it financial advice or any other business, how do you break down your client list? As always, thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us next week, and remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances, and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.